Hello guys, it's the Red One here coming at you today with another video. Now, the video I'm making today is about the Titanic, as you can tell by the title. Now, one thing you might know about me, or you don't know about me, is I'm very interested in the Titanic. I've watched obviously the famous film by James Cameron, Titanic, which I'm sure everyone's watched. Literally everyone on the planet has seen that film. And of course I've watched a lot of Titanic documentaries. Now, one major thing we all know about the Titanic, we all know the story about it. If there's someone on the planet that doesn't know the story of the Titanic, it baffled me. It's the most famous ship in the world for obvious reasons. So as you know, the ship was deemed unsinkable, struck an iceberg on its maiden voyage to America, breaching 5 watertight compartments, and of course that was one more compartment than the Titanic was able to handle, and it sank. We all know that. Everyone knows that. But like me, I'm sure you've often wondered what would happen on that fateful night if Titanic hit the iceberg at full speed head on. Didn't try and turn out the way of the iceberg and breach the side of the ship and scrape along the side of the ship and breach the 5 watertight compartments. What would happen if it hit the ship head on? Well, I'm going to tell you. Now, I'm sure you've watched a lot of clickbait bullshit videos out there about this exact scenario of what would actually happen. One of the main ones is by the YouTube channel Brightside. Now, I like Brightside. They do some good videos. I've seen some of them. But a lot of the videos about the Titanic are usually factually incorrect and not true. And, they're just done for views, things like that. So, one of the videos I actually saw a few years ago by Brightside, and I thought this can't be true, is they said if the Titanic hit the iceberg head on, a ripple effect had happened and a shockwave had happened, and all the rivets would pop out of place and the Titanic would literally blow up. I mean, not blow up like an explosion, but I mean blow up like a big shockwave. It'd go all the way down the ship, all the rivets would pop out of place, and the Titanic would sink within minutes. Now that is completely untrue. That would not happen. The design of the Titanic and physics and how the ship was built, we know that is just not the case. That would not happen to the Titanic. If the Titanic had rammed into the iceberg head on, it would have stayed afloat. It wouldn't have a massive shockwave happen and the Titanic just literally breaks apart and sinks in minutes. We know with physics that is not how it would happen. But what would happen? The Titanic would stay afloat, we all know that, but how? Well, I'm going to tell you. Now, of course, the Titanic would have stayed afloat, but to actually ram the iceberg, to actually ram the iceberg head on is something they would not have done on the Titanic on that night. Because whoever would have done that, whether it was Murdoch or whoever was driving the Titanic, they would have been in big trouble. Seeing an iceberg, the obvious solution is to straight steer the ship out of the way and get it out of harm's way. That was the obvious solution. If they just ploughed the Titanic into the iceberg, they would have been in a lot of trouble. The crew would have been in a hell of a lot of trouble for doing that. You know what I mean? So it was instinct to just get the Titanic out of the way. Now, as you know, the Titanic had 16 watertight compartments. The Titanic could stay afloat with 4 of these compartments fully breached and flooded with water. The front of the ship, the bow, would sink into the water a bit, and the stern would probably rise up a little bit. But the Titanic wouldn't sink. It would sink a little bit, but it wouldn't fully sink and everyone die. It would just sink a bit into the water and it would be able to stay afloat. As long as it's calm weather, if it was a massive thunderstorm and waves crashing against the ship, it would probably sink then because it'd probably spill over the bulkheads because obviously all the waves hitting the ship, things like that. But if it was calm weather, like at the night Titanic sunk, it would have been able to stay afloat. But of course, on that night, we know that didn't happen. Unfortunately, the iceberg breached 5 watertight compartments, which was one more than the Titanic was able to handle, simply dooming the ship. So, let me explain what would happen if the Titanic had rammed the iceberg head on. It would not have just a massive ripple effect, a massive shockwave, all the rivets pop out of place, the ship literally just explodes with all the impact, and it sinks within minutes. That is not going to happen. I'm sure you've seen a lot of clickbait videos like that, and that is not true. That would not happen in a million years. Let me tell you what would really happen right now. So, Titanic sailing along, the exact same thing happens. Obviously, it hits the iceberg head on this time, but I'm just explaining. So the Titanic is, driving along full speed through the ice field, and of course they see the iceberg. Knowing that they don't have enough time to get the ship out of the way, they decide to reverse the engines, and just go straight into the iceberg, what would happen? Well, people would have still been killed because the front of the ship, the bow, would have still been heavily crushed and damaged. So people in the front of the ship, whether that would be the coal workers that were putting coal into the ship, and generally people on the front of the ship that were inside that couldn't see the iceberg, they would have been crushed and killed instantly. So there would have been at least a good few deaths still on that night. However, it wouldn't have been as bad as it was in what actually happened, you know what I mean? So the front of the bow would have been completely crushed. And I'd say about 2 or 3 watertight compartments would have been breached and fully flooded. However, the Titanic, as you know, was able to stay afloat with 4 watertight compartments completely breached and flooded with water. So I'd say probably about 2 watertight compartments, maybe 3, but I'd say maybe about 2 would have been breached in the impact and several people would have still been killed. But the Titanic, heavily damaged, would have still been able to be salvaged. It wouldn't have sunk. The Titanic with two watertight, or three, the Titanic with 2 or 3 watertight compartments breached from hitting the iceberg head on, it would have definitely been able to stay afloat and just float in the water as everyone got on the lifeboats and waited for the Carpathia to show up, which was Titanic's hero ship that, you know, rescued the survivors. And then when everyone was successfully off the ship, the captain or whoever could come back to the Titanic, do some repairs to fix the ship, and then, well, actually, to be fair, they probably wouldn't do the repairs on the ship in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. They would probably just do a few repairs so they could tow the ship back to a dock or a port, and then do full repairs of the ship and then get it back out as an ocean liner. And then it had probably been used during the war as like a hospital ship like Britannic, but we all know what happened to the Britannic. That was got struck by a mine or a torpedo and then sunk too. So that's the answer to the question, guys. That's the answer to the question. Could Titanic have survived the impact of the iceberg if it hit it head on? General physics say, yes. Titanic would have been able to survive an impact with the iceberg head on. It had probably breached 2 or 3 watertight compartments, but the Titanic would have been able to stay afloat and waited for help. A few hundred people would have probably been killed in the front of the ship, though, so it wouldn't have been everyone survives and it's a miracle. No, some people would have still died because the people in the front of the ship would have died immediately being crushed. So, but that is the answer to the question, though. Could Titanic survive a head-on impact with the iceberg if they didn't steer away from it? If this time, in this scenario, the Titanic doesn't steer away from the ship... in this scenario, this time, if the Titanic doesn't stay away from the iceberg, it stays straight into it, right into it. It stays right into the iceberg and hits it head on. Would it have been able to survive? Yes. Titanic would have survived. And a lot more people wouldn't have been killed, but a few hundred would have still perished, being crushed in the ship. So I just wanted to make this video because, you know, there's a lot of untrue clickbait videos out there about what would have happened, and Titanic would not have sunk if it hit the iceberg head on. It would have been able to stay afloat with 2, possibly 3 watertight compartments breached and flooded with water. But it would have been able to survive. So, that's the answer to the question, guys. Hope you enjoyed. Just wanted to make a quick video explaining, because there's a lot of things about the Titanic people get wrong. You know, you'll watch some documentaries on it and literally everything they say is correct, and then you'll watch a documentary on it and literally everything they say on it is just untrue nonsense. Which is a shame, but it just happens with a lot of things. A lot of history things, a lot of people do get incorrect. A lot of people get it wrong. Some people do it by accident, and some people do it for the views and the money they'll make off of it. right side, you know what I mean? I do like their channel, though, but they do some clickbait bullshit videos. But, yeah, Titanic would have been able to survive. Hope you guys enjoyed, and, yeah, it was a good video. I will do more videos about the Titanic in the future if you guys want, but this was just a quick video, just letting you guys know what would have happened. Titanic would have been able to survive. Thanks for watching.